Evil monsters launch a brutal assault on humanity, overwhelming humans with sheer force. The people try to flee, but they are far too fragile against such overpowered foes. Amid the chaos, a monstrous figure breaks through the battlefield and enters a new zone, only to find another fearsome, armored monster locked in combat with a lone warrior. This warrior, a white-haired hero, unleashes everything he has in a desperate fight. Blow after blow, he strikes with fury, but the armored monster counters every attack with ease. Eventually, the hero is defeated. He is revealed to be Eos, the Empire's strongest swordsman. As Eos fades away, he acknowledges the terrifying power of his opponent, the Death Knight of Hell, who stands tall with his massive blade, watching silently as Eos vanishes. Suddenly, a sharp crack appears across the Death Knight's helmet, splitting it in half. As the helmet falls to the ground, the Death Knight clutches his head in agony. His glowing red eyes burn with pain, but then they shift. His original eyes return, and it seems he has regained his lost consciousness. His entire body begins to tremble uncontrollably. The scene cuts to another section of the battlefield. The Helios Empire's once proud flag now lies in flames. A towering monster surveys the destruction with satisfaction, pleased to have finally brought the so-called cursed empire to its knees. Fires rage across the capital. Amidst the carnage, the monster declares that revenge only grows sweeter with time. He turns around to face the captured king of Helios, who is now imprisoned by skeletal creatures. The monster, revealing himself as the Archlich Dorgo, mocks the king and asks if he can possibly comprehend the joy he feels after waiting 1,000 years to witness the end of mankind. King Howard Adel Light sheds tears as he confronts Dorgo, crying out over the massacre of his people. In desperation, he curses Dorgo, calling him a demon fit only for hell. But Dorgo simply laughs, amused by Howard's feeble resistance. As the king's words die out, Dorgo turns his attention to a ceremonial platform and announces his intention to proceed with his coronation. Hearing this enrages Howard even more. The thought of a monster like Dorgo being crowned emperor is too much to bear. But Dorgo relishes the moment. With dramatic flair, he strikes a triumphant pose and proclaims that, as the first being in history to unify the entire continent, he alone deserves the title of emperor. Howard, devastated, trembles in silent defeat, realizing he has no power left to resist. Just then, a group of elite monsters arrive and kneel before Dorgo. These are the Demon Lords, powerful beings who have sworn loyalty to him. Dorgo praises their contributions and then turns to the Death Knight, instructing him to retrieve the imperial crown. The Death Knight retrieves the crown while the Demon Lords applaud. Dorgo beams with pride and once again praises the Death Knight, declaring him the most loyal of all. No one, he says, has done more to secure his rise to power. Dorgo then wonders aloud how such loyalty should be rewarded. But the Death Knight remains silent. A beat of stillness follows. Then Dorgo, almost laughing to himself, admits it was foolish to ask. After all, the Death Knight is his slave, and serving him is reward enough. Before Dorgo can finish his thought, the Death Knight suddenly throws the crown into the air. Everyone's attention shifts upward. In one swift motion, the Death Knight slashes the crown in two, shocking the entire court of Demon Lords. Reacting quickly, Dorgo casts a protective barrier, while the Demon Lords leap in to defend him. But it's too late. The Death Knight unleashes a strange, powerful strike that breaks through their defenses and lands a blow on Dorgo himself. Staggered and stunned, Dorgo demands to know what the Death Knight is doing. He never gave such an order. Then, to his disbelief, the Death Knight begins to speak. He reveals that he has finally regained control over his own will. Dorgo, visibly shaken, can't believe what he's hearing. He had erased the knight's consciousness entirely. Or so he thought. But the Death Knight explains that while it may have seemed that way, he was never truly gone. His mind had remained, trapped, silent, watching everything unfold from within his own body. And now, at long last, he's ready to fight back. Dorgo couldn't believe what he was witnessing, but then he admitted that the Death Knight was truly his greatest creation. With a smirk, Dorgo told the Death Knight he would allow him to roam freely, at least until he figured out a way to take back control. The Demon Lords launched an attack, but the Death Knight stood perfectly still. In the next moment, a single devastating strike from him sent all the demon lords flying, defeating them instantly. Dorgo was stunned. The Death Knight had overpowered them with just one blow. Realizing the threat he now faced, Dorgo summoned thousands of undead soldiers. They charged toward the Death Knight, but he uttered a single word, and every undead froze in place. With a simple gesture of his hand, the Death Knight crushed them all instantly. Dorgo began to tremble. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He had created a being whose power now rivaled that of a god. Understanding that he stood no chance in a direct fight, Dorgo tried to reason with him. He feigned empathy, claiming that he might have done the same had he been in the Death Knight's position. But Dorgo still had a backup plan. Even if his physical body was destroyed, he could transfer his soul to a spare vessel, and from there, regain control over the Death Knight once again. However, the Death Knight revealed something terrifying. During the time he was trapped inside his body, he had devised 100 ways to kill Dorgo. He then assumed a battle stance, blue energy swirling around him, which immediately alarmed Dorgo. The Death Knight continued, saying he had developed a new sword art, one capable of taking down not just the body, but the soul itself. It was a technique he had created solely to take revenge on Dorgo. Dorgo was shaken, though he tried to convince himself that such a technique couldn't possibly exist. But before he could escape, the Death Knight struck. At first, Dorgo didn't understand what had happened. His body seemed intact. A flicker of hope sparked within him, making him believe the soul-cutting technique had failed. But then his eyes widened, and his soul, began rising from his body and into the sky. The Death Knight watched in silence. Soon, Dorgo's entire form exploded, leaving behind only the skull of his head. The Death Knight walked over, stepped on it, and crushed it, muttering, "Go to hell." Watching all of this was King Howard, frozen in fear, shaking as he tried to make sense of the chaos unfolding before him. The Death Knight, exhausted, finally allowed himself a moment of peace. The battle was over. Now, only one task remained. He picked up his sword and raised it high, voicing his desire to see his family again, to apologize for everything he had done. The scene shifted to a memory, a time when the Death Knight killed his own family. He asked them for forgiveness. Then, without hesitation, he stabbed himself. Everything went black. But then he heard a voice, a soft, familiar one, calling his name. Damien. He opened his eyes. His sister was standing beside him, asking why he had fallen asleep outside. Damien, stunned, thanked God that he was able to see her again, even if only before falling into hell. But then, something seemed strange. His sister looked far too young. She laughed at his reaction, teasing him by asking if he was trying to flatter her so she'd defend him when their father got angry. She promised she would, but urged him to come inside before it started to rain, warning that he'd catch a cold. She hurried off toward the house. Damien stood up slowly, watching her with a mixture of awe and confusion. He looked at his hands, realizing he was in his younger body. Something was different. He remembered destroying their family mansion with his own hands. Was this all a dream? Still dazed, he spotted a wooden stick nearby. He picked it up and approached a large stone. If this was a dream, the stick would break or do nothing. But if it was real, he took a stance and struck the stone with the stick. The stone shattered. Damien froze. Then his face contorted, not with fear, but with overwhelming emotion. He began laughing uncontrollably, tears streaming down his cheeks, his body trembling. He had returned to the past, and this time, he had a chance to make things right. Damien had many talents when he lived with his family, though none were the kind that brought pride. Once, he was kicked out of a tavern for brawling, causing disgrace to his family's reputation. It seemed Damien had a knack for staining the family's honor. On another occasion, while he slept peacefully in his room, his brother stormed in to confront him. Damien had gotten into a fight with the young son of Marquis Ryanbloom. As a result, their sister had been dragged by the Marquis's carriage, leaving her injured and in tears. It was clear Damien also had a talent for endangering the family's future. Their mother once came to him in tears, asking why he had taken out a massive loan against the family's estate. It seemed Damien was also gifted at squandering their fortune. Eventually, after so many incidents, his father finally lost his patience. He ordered Damien to leave the mansion, Damien didn't say a word. He turned to go, but before he could leave, his sister met him at the entrance. She held out some money and handed it to him with a smile, telling him to find happiness, despite all the pain he had caused her. Damien was stunned. Even after everything, she was still trying to help him. Trembling, he took the money and ran out of the mansion. That day, it felt less like leaving and more like escaping. For the first time in his life, Damien came to understand what guilt and shame truly were. He cried as he ran, overwhelmed by the weight in his heart. Now, Damien sat beneath the shade of a tree, trying to make sense of it all. Before he died, he had wished for just one chance to apologize to his family. But he never imagined he would actually return to the past. Looking up at the sky, he wondered if it was a divine miracle. His hands trembled, his body still affected by the powerful skill he had used earlier. That technique was called Shattering Wave, a devastating move that amplified the shock of a strike sevenfold. When Damien was the Death Knight, he had fought an enemy known for this skill. It was infamous for shattering fortress walls. Damien had acquired it by defeating that knight and mastering the technique himself. As he reflected, a loud voice interrupted his thoughts. Black-haired boy came running toward him, panting from exhaustion. Damien studied him, trying to recall who he was. He guessed his name, Victor, and surprisingly, he was right. Victor, still catching his breath, asked why Damien was still outside when his sister, Louise, had told him to come in. He also warned that Damien's father was furious and that he should hurry back. Hearing this, Damien blinked in confusion. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. Victor looked at him, baffled. "Are you seriously asking that?" Later, back inside Viscount Haskin's estate, Damien's father stood ready to strike him with a sword. Damien narrowly dodged the blow, but his father wasn't done. He lunged again, only to be held back by Louise and their mother. "Why did you get kicked out of a tavern for brawling?" his father shouted. Marilda, Damien's mother, and Louise tried to calm him down, but he was furious. His son had once again tarnished the family's honor. Paul Osborne Haskin, the head of the household, yelled at them to let him go so he could deal with Damien himself. But Damien wasn't afraid. He knew this moment. He had lived it before. He had truly returned to the past. His father continued shouting, but Marilda and Louise clung to him, begging him to think rationally. Amid the chaos, Damien found himself smiling softly. As strange as it was, he missed this. It had been so long since he had heard his father scold him. Suddenly, all three, Paul, Marilda, and Louise, fell silent. They stared at Damien, who was trembling and crying. Seeing this, Marilda and Louise turned on Paul. "You've gone too far," they scolded. Paul slowly sheathed his sword, then turned to Damien. "Well, what excuse do you have this time?" Damien looked up. "I have no excuse." Paul blinked, thrown off by the answer. He had expected the usual deflections and justifications. Damien was always pathetic, always trying to weasel his way out of consequences. To hear him take full responsibility was shocking. Damien already knew what his father thought of him, but hearing it said so directly still stung. Damien continued, admitting that his actions had deeply stained the honor of his family. He took full responsibility and said there was no excuse for what he had done. Paul, however, remained skeptical. To him, Damien was still hopeless, just talking big again. He told Damien that he wouldn't let things slide, no matter how remorseful he now claimed to be. But Damien surprised him. Calmly, he said he would resolve the matter himself. Without waiting for a response, Damien turned and opened the exit door. "I'll go and fix the mess I made," he said. "And after that, I'll accept whatever punishment you decide." Paul, Marilda, and Louise were left speechless, trying to process what had just happened. Paul even wondered aloud if Damien had hit his head too hard during one of his past beatings. Later that day, Damien arrived in the bustling commercial city of Landward. He stopped in front of a particular house guarded by two rough-looking men who resembled street thugs. From a hidden spot, Damien and Victor watched them closely. Victor, clearly nervous, asked if Damien was seriously planning to go inside. He mentioned the rumors that the place was backed by a criminal organization. "You're going to get yourself into serious trouble," Victor warned. Damien started walking forward. "If you're scared, you can go back to the mansion," he said casually. But Victor followed him, saying, "I can't just run away and leave you alone. If things go wrong, we both run together." Damien smiled slightly. "Don't worry. I'm just going to apologize politely to the owner and leave. Nothing's going to happen. He assured Victor that he would handle the situation cleanly. Victor stopped and sighed. I really hope it goes well, he muttered. As Damien approached the door, he couldn't help but wonder how he had returned to the past. He still had no answers, but one thing was clear. He didn't want to repeat his mistakes. He had decided to make things right, starting now. When he reached the guards, they immediately recognized him. Isn't this the noble brat we warned not to come back? One of them asked. Damien didn't remember the details clearly, but their faces did seem familiar. He bowed slightly. I'm here to apologize to your boss for what I did last time. For a moment, the guards were silent. Then they burst out laughing. One said he would pass the message along, while the other mocked Damien for pretending to act dignified just because he was a noble. They laughed cruelly, calling him the scoundrel eldest son of a disgraceful family, and went so far as to insult his sister. Then, one of the guards casually slapped Damien across the face and sneered, I might accept your apology if you introduce us to your sister. The other guard chuckled. Stop it, you'll make him cry again. Damien clenched his fists. He had come with the intention of apologizing and resolving things peacefully, but he quickly realized he had overestimated himself. Trying to act polite and composed was too difficult, especially when they insulted his family. Without a word, Damien reached for the knife one of the guards had been carelessly playing with and snatched it from him. The laughter stopped immediately. I really thought I could come here, apologize, and leave, Damien said coldly. The guards backed away, alarmed. Put the knife down now. But Damien had made up his mind. In one swift motion, he struck at the guard with the knife and injures his hand. The man screamed in pain, collapsing to the ground. The second guard quickly drew his sword, but Damien took a stance, ready to fight. His eyes were sharp, unwavering. From a distance, Victor watched the entire scene unfold. Horrified, he began to cry, overwhelmed by fear and disbelief. As Victor watched the fight unfold, more bystanders began to gather, curious about the commotion. Victor, however, was deeply worried about Damien's safety. One of the guards, clearly agitated, tried to intimidate Damien. Do you even know who you're messing with? Damien remained calm. Not really, he replied. And I don't care. Now finish what you started. Sweating nervously, the guard raised his fist to reveal a snake tattoo. You're picking a fight with the Black Serpent organization. No one who crosses us walks away unharmed. The mention of the name triggered a memory in Damien. The Black Serpent was a growing underground organization expanding its influence across landward. The tavern Damien had approached was one of their affiliated businesses. He remembered how, during a past visit, he had complained about being outrageously overcharged. In response, the guards had beaten and humiliated him publicly, forcing him to apologize and pay up. As the memory resurfaced, Damien suddenly laughed, realizing he had been the one who truly deserved an apology. His laughter confused the guard. What's so funny? The guard growled, stepping forward and preparing to attack. You nobles think you're untouchable, huh? We'll show you otherwise. The guard charged, but Damien smoothly dodged the blow. As the man stumbled, Damien swept his leg out from under him, sending him crashing to the ground. Before the guard could recover, Damien grabbed his leg. Eliminating a few of you won't be enough, Damien muttered. But, for my family's sake, I'll hold back. Despite that, Damien swiftly injures the guard foot, sending him screaming in agony. The other injured guard wailed alongside him. Just as Damien thought it was over, a group of reinforcements arrived. More guards, all armed. Their leader stepped forward. You're not from around here, are you? What crew are you with? I'm not with any group, Damien replied coolly. I came to apologize to the owner, but ended up receiving an apology instead. He then added, now be polite and lead me to the owner. I've got business with him. The leader, confused and irritated, dismissed Damien's words. If you won't come quietly, we'll drag you in, he threatened. He pointed at Damien and ordered his men to attack. Sighing, Damien took a deep breath, then exploded into action. In mere moments, he defeated them all. Their leader stood frozen in disbelief as his men groaned in pain, lying defeated on the ground. Damien stood before him, breathless and visibly exhausted. The effort had taken a toll on him. Still, Damien stepped forward and threatened the leader directly. The man pleading, please, I was wrong. Have mercy. But Damien didn't listen. He charged, and the leader fled in terror, crying as he ran. Damien caught up to him quickly and took him down. The scene shifted to the inside of a restaurant. People were unaware of the chaos outside. Then the tavern doors burst open. The guard captain stumbled inside, looking battered and shaken. I misjudged him, he stammered. A moment later, Damien stepped in behind him. With a cold tone, he said, "You should have listened when I was being nice." The room went silent. As the reality of the situation sank in, patrons scrambled to escape. Within seconds, the tavern was empty. Only Damien remained, walking forward with steady steps. It's finally over, he thought. One less nuisance to deal with. Then the tavern owner arrived, storming into the room to investigate the noise. He was furious. "Where are all my guards?" he demanded. Damien turned to face him, already suspecting who he was. "You must be Taver Nauner," he said. Taver blinked. "And who are you?" "If you're asking about the delinquents outside, I've already taken care of them," Damien replied. Taver rushed to the entrance and shocked to see the Black Serpent members defeated. "Who are you?" he asked again, now more cautiously. "And why did you cause such a scene in my business?" "I'm Damien," he answered plainly. Recognition dawned on Taver's face. "You're the noble of this town." Damien told Taver that he wasn't there to cause trouble. He had come to demand an apology. Taver raised an eyebrow and asked him to elaborate. Damien explained how the prices for drinks at the tavern had been absurdly high, and when he had dared to complain, Taver's men had beaten him and thrown him out onto the street. The incident not only humiliated him, because of that moment, both he and his family had lost far too much. Taver, unimpressed, responded with mockery. He feigned confusion about what Damien and his family had supposedly lost, and assumed Damien was talking about something as trivial as family honor. Smirking, he said, "From where I stand, there wasn't any honor left for Baron Haskan anyway." Those words struck a nerve. Damien clenched his fists, struggling to keep his composure, but his anger boiled over. Taver, noticing the reaction, picked up a wooden staff and sneered. "You're a fool if you think I'd ever apologize to someone like you. Quit this pathetic noble act and pay for disrupting my business." Damien, instead of getting angry, laughed. "I was going to forgive you," he said calmly. "All you had to do was apologize nicely." His expression changed. "But if this is how you want to handle it, that's fine by me." In one swift motion, Damien leaped into the air, aiming to strike Taver and make him pay for every insult and humiliation. But just before he could land the blow, someone intercepted his attack. Damien was caught completely off guard. As he landed back on the ground, he immediately sensed energy radiating from the man who had blocked him. The stranger stepped forward, now standing between Damien and Taver. Taver smirked from behind his new ally. "Perfect timing," he said with a grin. Damien stood and dusted himself off, eyeing the man cautiously. "You're pretty skilled," he said. "Doesn't seem like someone like you would be working in a place like this." The man remained silent. Damien narrowed his eyes. "So, tell me, why would a knight defend someone like Taver?" Knights are individuals who dedicate their lives to the path of chivalry. There are 3 ranks among them: trainee, apprentice knight, and the highest, formal knight. These ranks are determined based on the level of training and mastery each knight has attained. Formal knights, in particular, possess the ability to freely wield aura. Their strength is legendary. They can take down monsters and mountains with a single blow. In other words, formal knights are beings of near superhuman power. Back at the tavern, Taver burst out laughing and mocked Damien cruelly. He revealed that Ted was the beloved apprentice knight of the Black Serpent organization's boss, which meant, according to Taver, that Damien had no chance of leaving alive. Damien, however, remained composed. He noted that Ted was only an apprentice, which explained the faint aura he sensed earlier. This surprised Ted. Damien was able to detect aura that hadn't even fully materialized. Damien then remarked that it made sense for someone like Ted to end up in a place like this. "You must have lacked the talent," Damien said coldly. "That's why you couldn't become a formal knight. You were expelled." Taver, uninterested in Damien's taunts, turned to Ted. "So, what reward do you want once you finish him off?" Ted, furious from Damien's words, clenched his teeth. "We'll talk about rewards later," he said, and launched himself at Damien, determined to silence him. Damien narrowly dodged the strike, but Ted recovered quickly and attacked again. Damien continued to evade with skill, noting how precise Ted's sword movements were despite the force behind them. Still, Damien was growing tired. His body was reaching its limit. He knew he'd need to find a way to increase his mana once he returned home. Ted, growing more frustrated with every missed strike, finally prepared a powerful finishing move. "Block this, if you can," he shouted. A greenish energy began to surge from his body as he assumed a stance. Damien's eyes narrowed. He recognized it immediately. Ted was using a secret ultimate technique. As the blade approached, Damien closed his eyes to focus. He had no choice but to respond with his own secret technique. At that moment, the scene shifted, years into the past. A lone soldier was taking down his opponents on the battlefield. His name was Salman Guay, the master of the Sword of Death, a feared and ruthless killer. After eliminating the last of the human soldiers, Salman Guay turned to face Damien, who was the Death Knight at that time. "Enough of the silent act," Salman Guay growled. "Scream if you don't want to die." But Damien, completely under the control of necromantic magic, remained silent. The lack of reaction unsettled Salman Guay. "You don't understand me?" he asked with a twisted grin. "No problem. That just means I get to kill one more today." As a parting gift, Salman Guay decided to use his secret technique. "Humans are made mostly of water," he said. "Once you understand that, you can defeat them easily." With that, he unleashed his infamous move, Calamity. Though it was just a wooden blade, he used it to take down the Death Knight. Salman Guay laughed triumphantly. "You should have run when you had the chance." But his joy was short-lived. He suddenly sensed something. Salman Guay turned around, horrified, only to see the Death Knight have healed himself. "He's not human," Salman Guay muttered. "He's undead." In the very next moment, Salman Guy's thoughts were silenced as the Death Knight struck. The Death Knight takes him down with a single strike. The scene returned to the present, where Ted was now the one falling. He collapsed to the ground, defeated. For Damien, it was always the same. Every enemy who challenged him met their end, wearing that same expression. Ever since Damien became a Death Knight, his abilities had far surpassed even his own expectations. Among his most fearsome traits was the ability to absorb and replicate his opponent's techniques and combat states, making them entirely his own. After witnessing Ted's complete defeat, Taver was overcome with fear. His body trembled uncontrollably, and in a panic, he dropped to his knees, sweating profusely. Bowing before Damien, he offered an apology for daring to tarnish the honor of House Haskin. As a token of regret, he handed over a small sum of money, hoping to soothe Damien's wounded pride. Damien stared at the coins for a moment. He remembered that his original purpose for coming to the tavern had been to apologize, but given his family's financial circumstances, he had no reason to refuse the compensation. With a commanding tone, Damien declared, "This isn't enough, but I'll let it slide." He then turned around and called for Victor, who had been hiding at the doorway and watching everything unfold. "Come in and take everything," Damien instructed. Victor obeyed immediately, stepping inside and gathering all the money into a large bag. He was still in shock. Had he not seen Damien's strength with his own eyes, he never would have believed it. The swordsmanship Damien displayed was completely unfamiliar. Victor couldn't help but wonder when Damien had learned such powerful techniques. Once they had collected everything, Damien and Victor exited the tavern. Taver and his remaining guards bowed again, respectfully wishing Damien a safe return home. As they walked, Victor glanced at the bag in awe. "It's my first time seeing so much treasure in one place," he muttered in disbelief. Taver watched them silently from behind, masking the rage boiling inside him. Though he bowed and remained outwardly submissive, his thoughts were seething. "I'll get every last coin back from that brat," he vowed. "The Black Serpent's boss will hear about this." Just as Taver began plotting, Damien stopped. Without a word, he turned around, drew his knife, and in a swift motion, strikes at Taver's ear, using the Calamity technique, a secret skill of incredible precision and power. Taver collapsed to the ground, screaming in agony. Standing over him, Damien spoke coldly. "Tell the Black Serpent that if they even think about laying a hand on my family, no matter how small the threat, I won't stand by quietly." Taver looked up at him with fury in his eyes, gritting his teeth in pain. "We'll see," he thought. "We'll see what becomes of you." The sun began to set on the horizon as Damien and Victor made their way back to the mansion. Though the weight of the past still lingered, Damien knew that doing a single good deed for his family wasn't enough to erase the harm he had once caused. But in this new life, with a second chance in his hands, he had made a quiet vow to himself. He would no longer bring shame to his family. Meanwhile, in the Lion Bloom Marquise, a nobleman stood before a mirror, adjusting his appearance. With a strange glint in his eyes, he asked his brother, "Have you heard they say love always comes with pain?" His brother raised an eyebrow. "Where's this coming from? You look like you're about to duel someone." The man chuckled darkly and replied, "No duels today. I'm just finally going to find love." At the Haskin mansion, Damien and Victor made their way toward the office of Damien's father. Yawning, Damien remarked, "It's been a while since I slept so soundly." Damien chuckled. "Well, everything worked out in the end. Even if our original objective changed a bit, we were handsomely rewarded, and more importantly, the rumors are going to spread." Victor raised a brow. "Rumors?" "Of course," Damien replied. "Word will spread across town that someone messed with the Baron's eldest son at a tavern and got wrecked. No one will dare to take our family lightly anymore," he added with a slight grin. "And maybe the image of the delinquent eldest son will improve, just a little." Hearing Damien speak so candidly about his reputation, Victor was taken aback. So, he's actually self-aware, he thought. Though trying to stay upbeat, Victor's voice still carried concern. "Things might have gone well this time, but I'm worried about the Black Serpent. You didn't just take down some thugs, you eliminated a good number of their men, including their apprentice knight." Damien waved it off confidently. No matter how bold the Black Serpent organization is, they wouldn't dare openly attack a noble household. And even if they try something, I'll stop them. So relax. Victor nodded slowly, still uneasy. "Well, if anything, your swordsmanship isn't normal. Where did you even learn to fight like that?" At that, Damien started to sweat. "I trained wherever I could," he said vaguely. "Somehow I got good." Before Victor could press further, a loud voice boomed down the hall. "Damien!" It was Paul, Damien's father, running toward him, worry etched across his face. "Where have you been since yesterday? You didn't get into another incident, did you?" Paul grabbed Damien's shoulders, clearly bracing for bad news. But Damien calmly turned toward Victor and replied, "Don't worry, father. Like I said, I went to clean up the mess I made." Paul looked confused. "What are you even talking about?" Without missing a beat, Damien gestured toward Victor. Victor opened the large bag, revealing stacks of money and land documents. Paul and Marilda gasped in disbelief. Marilda, overwhelmed, nearly collapsed. "With this much," she cried, "we can finally pay the overdue wages." Damien explained, "I went back to the tavern where I got thrown out. Turns out there was a billing mistake. The owner felt bad and gave me this as an apology." Paul squinted suspiciously. "Can I really believe that?" "You can trust me," Damien said confidently. Marilda, still amazed, nodded. "I believe it. There's no other way Damien could have come across this much money." Damien turned to Victor. "If you don't believe me, ask Victor. He was with me the whole time." Then, with a playful blink, he asked, "Right, Victor?" Without hesitation, Victor replied, "It's true." Satisfied, Paul and Marilda exchanged glances and finally accepted Damien's explanation. Marilda smiled warmly. "You're amazing, Damien." Victor watched the scene silently. Every time he opens his mouth, it's a lie, he thought. The scene shifted. Damien now ran through the forest, panting heavily. He stopped and leaned against a tree to catch his breath. "I haven't even run that far," he muttered, frustrated. "And I'm already exhausted." Though he had so much to do, his current physical condition limited him severely. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small vial. "Good thing I got my hands on this," he said. It was a tonic he received from Taver, a stamina and vitality enhancer from the School of Alchemy. Curious, Damien recalled asking Taver about it. "The School of Alchemy?" he had said. Taver had explained that alchemists were a specialized group known for creating powerful tonics. The one Damien held was so valuable, it was often traded for gemstones of equal weight. Remembering that, Damien smiled. Finally, he thought, a little luck on my side. Damien drank the tonic, and soon his body surged with renewed vitality. Strength coursed through him as the powerful effects of the potion took hold. He exhaled with relief. He understood something clearly. If he wanted to become stronger, he needed to address his greatest weakness first, his stamina. Only by overcoming this could he ascend once again to the level he once held in his past life, a realm where he stood above all living beings. His thoughts turned to Dorgo, the necromancer who would one day unleash an army of undead upon the world. Though that event was still years away, Damien knew he had to act now. If he wanted to protect his family from what was to come, he had to become powerful enough to eliminate Dorgo before that future unfolded. Only then could he ensure their happiness. With new resolve, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began running again, committing himself fully to the path ahead. This time, too, he thought, I will defeat Dorgo. The scene shifted to a tall, ominous building cloaked in darkness. Its walls were adorned with snake insignias, marking it as the suspected main hideout of the Black Serpent organization. Inside, a man grunted in frustration and dismissed Ted, calling him a foolish despite having been their most skilled mercenary. This man was Cedric Walker, the ruthless boss of the Black Serpents. One of his underlings cautiously asked if they should tend to Ted's injuries, but Cedric barked out an order instead. Throw Ted out. Why waste resources? We can always pay someone else to get their hands dirty. Groaning in pain, Ted struggled to his feet, his body barely holding together. Hearing movement, Cedric turned around and mockingly clapped. Still got some strength left, huh? Go get patched up. Maybe I'll hire you again someday. But Ted was seething with rage. Glaring at Cedric, he used the last of his strength to lunge at him in defiance. Just as his strike was about to land, a dark mana comes out of nowhere and wrapped around Ted's leg, binding him midair. It coiled around him, completely immobilizing his body. A cloaked figure emerged from the shadows. Consider that your first job, he said calmly. Cedric nodded. Show me what you can do. Ted writhed, shouting at the cloaked man to let him go. But the figure began chanting a spell, and the black mana binding Ted started to shift, transforming into monsters. Realizing what was about to happen, Ted's defiance turned into terror. Please, Cedric, help me, he screamed. But Cedric didn't care, and the monsters took down Ted. Cedric grimaced. The cloaked man looked at him. Are you satisfied? Cedric paused, then muttered, Yes, but keep it cleaner next time. Understood, the man replied. Now what's the next job? That's why I called you, Cedric said, lowering his voice. Someone's been interfering with the Black Serpent. His name is Damien. He's a noble, so we can't go after him openly. But I want him hurt badly. The worse it is, the more I'll pay. Cedric handed over a pouch of advance payment. The cloaked man took it. Smirking, he states that, you can count on me. The scene shifts to Damien, deep into his weight training. After completing his final set, he checks his muscles in the mirror and nods in satisfaction, impressed by the results. The tonic he had taken was clearly working. His stamina had improved noticeably in just a few days. Wiping sweat from his brow, Damien reached for his water bottle. Something feels off, he thought. It's been several days, but nothing's happened. He had been certain the Black Serpent organization would retaliate by now. As he drank, a sudden rustle came from the nearby bushes. Damien's instincts flared. Without hesitation, he rushed toward the sound, hand ready to grab and punish the intruder. But as he reached out, he froze. His hand was wrapped around the neck of none other than his younger brother, Abel. Realizing his mistake, Damien immediately let go. Abel dropped to the ground, coughing. You've gotten stronger, Abel muttered, adjusting his glasses. He took a deep breath and reached toward Abel. I didn't do that, he said, his voice low, filled with regret. I'm sorry, but Abel didn't respond with warmth. He looked away coldly. I didn't come here for an apology. Abel stood up and brushed off his clothes. I came because I heard from Father that you went to the tavern and got an apology. But when I asked around, I heard a fight broke out and several people were injured. So tell me, Damien, are you lying to the family again? Damien smiled and took a sip of water. It's true, he said calmly. I fought. I won. Abel's face turned red with fury. He jumped to his feet, storming toward Damien, pointing aggressively. You can't even fight. There's no way you beat anyone. His voice grew louder, his words sharper. Did you hire someone? Pay a mercenary? Are you trying to lie your way into the family's good graces again? Damien didn't flinch. He simply nodded. I did it myself. There was no hesitation, no guilt in his voice. Abel's hands trembled. He leaned in, eyes burning. Stop lying. You might fool the rest of the family, but not me. Never me. His voice cracked as he shouted. Don't bring more shame to our name. Father's always cleaning up after your messes. Just stop. Damien only smiled. Slowly, he reached out and patted Abel's head. Abel's always been like this, he thought. So serious. So honest. Always the one who cares most about the family. He kept patting gently. Don't worry. I won't tarnish the family name. Not anymore. Abel froze. For a second, he was stunned. Damien was treating him like a real older brother would. Annoyed and embarrassed, Abel swatted Damien's hand away, but Damien's arm didn't budge. It was too strong. Let go. Abel growled, gritting his teeth as he tried to pull Damien's hand away, to no effect. Damien just chuckled. I promise, Damien said again. No more trouble. Just then, Victor came sprinting toward them. His footsteps echoed through the hall, and his face was pale with fear. Damien, he shouted, breathless. Something really bad just happened. Damien and Abel exchanged a quick glance and ran after him without a word. They rushed down the hallway, Victor leading the way, until they burst through the living room doors. The moment they entered, they stopped dead in their tracks. Paul and Marilda were sitting on the couch. Between them sat a stranger, a man with neatly styled brown hair, calmly sipping tea. The room was thick with silence. The man looked up with a small smile and said, So, Damien's finally here. The man looked up and smiled, saying Damien had arrived at the perfect time. He was just telling the Viscount about what had happened at the banquet hall. He then apologized for showing up so suddenly, but explained that he had no choice since his father had learned of the incident. Damien's heart sank. He had a bad feeling something like this would happen, but in the chaos, he had forgotten one crucial detail. He had already crossed paths with Eowyn Lionbloom. Eowyn leaned back and casually asked Damien if he remembered what had happened at the last social gathering. Damien did remember. At that party, Eowyn had mocked him publicly, making fun of him, and even insulting his eyes. When Damien confronted him, Eowyn laughed it off and pretended to apologize in front of everyone, saying that Damien is imagining things. He told the crowd that he never said anything offensive. Then, as he leaned close to Damien's ear, he whispered cruelly, I did say it. But what are you going to do about it? Provoked beyond reason, Damien had punched Eowyn. Now, in hindsight, Damien regretted not holding back. He realized it had been strange at the time. Eowyn was a trained knight. How had he been hit so easily? A suspicion grew in Damien's mind. Was it all planned from the start? Eowyn, still smiling, turned to Paul, the Viscount, and offered a solution to the incident. He admitted he had admired Louise for a long time. Paul furrowed his brow. And what exactly are you trying to say? Eowyn straightened, his tone suddenly formal. I wish to marry Louise. His words shocked Marilda, Paul, and Abel, but Damien remained silent, already knowing this move too well. In his past life, Eowyn had taken advantage of their family's vulnerabilities in the same manipulative way. Damien remembered it clearly. Eowyn continued, explaining that if their families were joined in marriage, the incident could be treated as a private matter. That way, the disrespect Eowyn had suffered could be quietly overlooked. Paul listened to the proposal, then rejected it outright. Visibly irritated, Eowyn pressed further. She already has a fiancé, Paul added. She's in a committed relationship. But Eowyn cut him off. Then how will you and your family take responsibility for insulting me? Do you think the house of a mere Viscount has can withstand the wrath of House Lionbloom? He leaned in slightly. So make your choice. Either your family suffers the consequences, or Louise becomes my wife. Paul hesitated. He knew full well that House Lionbloom was one of the most powerful noble families in the Apple Kingdom. But no matter how dire the situation, he couldn't allow his daughter to marry someone like Eowyn. Suddenly, Louise entered the room. I'll accept the marriage proposal, she said, her voice trembling but composed. Paul stood up in shock. Louise, what are you talking about? Abel quickly added. You shouldn't be the one to take responsibility for something Damien did. Tears welled in Damien's eyes. Louise was clearly afraid, shaking, but she forced a smile and nodded. It's fine. I'll do it. And just like that, Damien's worst fear was coming true, again. Even in this life, his sister would suffer because of him. Eowyn laughed, clapping his hands in amusement. You truly are a wise woman, Louise, he he said smugly, walking toward her. I'll send someone soon to discuss the arrangements. But before he could take another step, Damien stepped in front of him, eyes glowing faintly red with fury. Eowyn raised an eyebrow and tapped Damien on the shoulder. Do you have something to say? Damien was seething inside. He knew what was at stake. If Eowyn married Louise, he would ruin her life. But Damien had promised himself he wouldn't cause more trouble. Still, this time, he couldn't stay silent. He whispered something so quietly that only Louise, standing nearby, heard it. Her eyes widened in shock. What was that? Eowyn asked smugly. Say it louder. The next moment, Damien's fist crashed into Eowyn's face, sending him stumbling back. Everyone froze. Damien stood tall, not flinching. I'm against this marriage, he said firmly. Completely. He had tried to endure it, for the sake of his sister, for the sake of the family. But enough was enough. No one was taking Louise's future from her, not this time. The scene shifts to Damien's past life, a time when Eowyn had already married Louise. One sunny day at the Haskin estate, servants rushed to Damien and informed him that Eowyn and Louise's carriage had arrived. A warm joy filled Damien's chest. It had been so long since he'd last seen his sister. Smiling brightly, he walked quickly toward the entrance, ready to welcome her. But the smile froze on his face. Eowyn was dragging Louise by the arm, shouting at her with a twisted expression of fury. I bring you to your family's house, and this is how you act, he yelled, completely indifferent to the watching eyes around him. Guilt surged through him like a rising tide. She's suffering because of the choices I made. Right then, Damien clenched his fists. Something inside him shattered. I will never forgive Eowyn. Back in the present, Damien stood before Eowyn with rage burning in his eyes. I am against the marriage proposal, he declared firmly. Eowyn staggered backward, collapsing to the ground. Everyone in the room was stunned. Hearing the commotion, Eowyn's knights rushed into the room with swords drawn. They quickly assessed the scene. Eowyn on the floor and Damien standing in front of him. Both knights drew their blades. Did you strike Lord Eowyn? One of them demanded. Damien calmly looked at them. He could tell they were personal knights of Eowyn. Eowyn rose slowly, laughing bitterly. You dare hit me? Not once but twice? Then, drawing his own sword, he says, You struck my face. Do you have a death wish? One of his knights immediately stepped in front of him. Please, my lord, calm down. There are witnesses here. Let us handle this. But Eowyn, blinded by rage, snapped, I told you to move. Before the knight could respond, Eowyn struck him hard, sending him crashing into the wall. Louise and Abel gasped in horror. Abel began moving toward Damien, his voice tense. How do you plan to resolve this, Damien? Louise, realizing that Eowyn wouldn't let Damien off easily, tried to intervene. Stop, please. But Damien raised his hand, stopping her. It's all right, he said, his voice steady. I'll handle it. He didn't want Louise to sacrifice herself because of him again. Damien turned to Eowyn. Let's settle this with a duel. Eowyn raised an eyebrow. A duel? We'll fight with swords, Damien explained. If you win, I'll do whatever you say. But if I win, you forget everything that's happened so far. Eowyn scoffed. And why would I agree to that? What do I gain? Louise already accepted the proposal. Damien smiled coolly. Why are you dodging the challenge? Don't tell me. Are you afraid you'll lose to me? The taunt struck a nerve. Eowyn's face twisted with anger. His pride flared at the suggestion that Damien's earlier punch had been anything more than a lucky shot. With a twisted grin, he decided he would teach Damien a lesson and reclaim Louise in the process. Smiling wickedly, he raised his sword and accepted the challenge. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, the stage was set for the duel between Damien and Eowyn. Before the match began, Marilda approached Paul and pleaded with him to stop the duel. Paul, however, remained firm. If Damien has this much confidence, then he must have something planned, he said. And if not, all we can do is hope for a miracle. Hearing this, Abel shook his head silently. In his mind, there was no miracle to hope for. Eowyn was already a fully fledged knight, and Damien stood no chance. As Eowyn drew his sword, Abel's doubts grew. He believed his older brother was walking into certain defeat. Eowyn looked at Damien. Shall we begin? He asked mockingly. Then, with a smirk, he added, But how do you plan to fight without a sword? Damien replied calmly, Don't worry. A single fork will be more than enough. Hearing that Damien intended to duel with a fork made Paul, Marilda, Louise, and Abel visibly lose hope. Louise even grew dizzy, imagining how badly this could end. Eowyn burst out laughing. "You've gone mad with fear," he roared. "But don't worry, I won't hold back." Without warning, Eowyn charged forward. Damien swiftly dodged the strike, leaving Eowyn momentarily stunned. Regaining his composure, Eowyn activated his sword art, Lion's Roar, Fierce Sword, and began swinging his blade with immense force. But as the dust cleared, Damien stood still, completely unharmed. Eowyn's knights stepped back in shock, one of them gasping, "What just happened?" Even Eowyn gritted his teeth in disbelief. He had seen it. Damien had dodged every attack effortlessly, his movements blurring like a phantom, and he hadn't even broken a sweat. Meanwhile, Damien observed Eowyn with calm intensity. Inside, he was pleased. Eowyn was rattled, losing focus. Damien felt proud. All the stamina and training he'd put in were finally paying off. In fact, to Damien, the duel was already won. He had studied and memorized the Lionbloom sword style from start to finish. Eowyn was no longer a mystery to him. His thoughts drifted to Michael Lionbloom, Eowyn's older brother, a powerful and terrifying knight. Damien remembered his brutal battle with Michael before the regression. Compared to him, Eowyn wasn't even close. Just then, Damien sensed something strange. Who was now building red energy around his body, preparing to strike again. This time, Eowyn shouted, "You won't be able to dodge." As crimson aura enveloped Eowyn's blade, Damien recognized the technique instantly and knew it wouldn't be easy to avoid. The pressure around them intensified. Eowyn charged like a storm. Damien gripped his fork tightly, his instincts sharpening. Now's the moment, he thought. In that split second, Damien activated the Sword Saint's technique. Their weapons clashed, Damien's fork against Eowyn's sword, and a surge of powerful energy erupted from the collision. Abel and Louise gasped, stunned by the sheer force of the impact. But the most shocked of all was Eowyn. Not only had Damien blocked his ultimate attack with a fork, he remained completely unharmed. Eowyn's hands trembled in fear. Before he could react, Damien slid the fork along the length of Eowyn's sword. An opening had appeared. With flawless timing, Damien unleashed his secret technique. 10,000 flows returned to origin. The force of it disarmed Eowyn, sending his sword flying into the air. Get him. Damien charged forward. In one swift motion, he drove the fork forward, striking at Eowyn with the fork, making Eowyn fall to the ground with fear.